Let's start with the industry-wide impact of coronavirus. There have been some big casualties, such as OneWeb, and some smaller ones, such as Sky and Space Global. What is your take on how the industry is weathering this unprecedented storm?
I think we've been of course following the industry for a while, and we've also seen a certain amount of impact, of course, of the coronavirus on the industry. But I don't think the casualties are directly related to the coronavirus per se. I think what it is it is crystallizing out what are the good business plans and what probably have been teetering on success versus failure for a while, and it has pushed some people to make the choices maybe a little bit earlier than they want to. I think in certain cases, if you look at the OneWeb constellation, for example, they have been quite a bit at a competitive push against the Starlink constellation and an upcoming Telesat constellation. I think if you look at that, you realize that they may have had to have a better, more competitive product on the market to keep a foothold, and with a backer such as SoftBank, which probably was coming also on the heels of a WeWork disaster. They were not as eager to keep on betting on that business strategy. So I think what we're seeing is that coronavirus is now crystallizing who are going to be the long-term winners and long-term not so winners, and people are making the right decisions there.
And what effect is the pandemic having on Mynaric? I mean, recently you announced that you were continuing hiring through the crisis. So is Mynaric unaffected by these circumstances? Has anything changed on a day-to-day basis?
I think it will be wrong to say that we are unaffected. I think everyone in the industry is affected. Everyone in the world is affected by this crisis. We all had to find new ways of doing today, and we are in an advantageous situation where a lot of our work is engineering, just CAD, or a lot of just people doing office-based work, which translated itself quite well to working from home. We have a good amount of IT set up that allow us to collaborate with each other. We had already moved most of our meetings, as we also have a US office as well, to the online platforms, and that allows us to collaborate and work with each other. Of course, there's a hardware part to our business as well, where you have to get your hands dirty and do some amount of work. But I would say that in the phase that we find ourselves, the hardware work is in the early production phases, where the social distancing can mostly be met. So we find ourselves not too hit by the crisis, being able to work almost as with the efficiency as before. Where it has probably a little bit more effect on the way we work is, of course, on the supply chain side. We are working, making sure that certain critical suppliers are supplying on time, and dealing with the 1-2 month delays in some of the areas, and making sure that our schedules still support that. And maybe on the business development side, we had to do shift more towards, again, online meetings and online business development. And I got to be honest, actually, in that sense, we've been having more, not less calls, because I think as the companies have opted to do more for work from home and social distancing, they have been doing a lot more business development with online calls. So actually, my calendar is more full with scheduled calls than before.
So are you confident of meeting previously announced targets, such as planning your first customer missions in the second half of 2020?
We are confident. We have made the statements that we are looking in the second half of the year, delivering both space and air terminals into the hands of our customers, and that commitment hasn't wavered. I think the 1 or 2 months of delay that could happen out of this crisis don't really change the statement there that we will be successful in delivering these products into the hand of our customers. We were not targeting immediately December. There was more leeway there, and I'm quite sure that we will make quite a splash in the industry when the first customers get their hands on the world's first constellation grade optical terminals, for example.
Why are these new optical terminals so important?
A lot to be said there. I think overall we are seeing, of course, this shift in going from individual large satellites in geostationary orbit that have limited bandwidth for a very large area to this new paradigm shift of many satellites. And there is people thinking, talking SpaceX here, deploying tens of thousands of satellites into low Earth orbit to cover the world, the complete world, with plenty of broadband for everyone, which we are seeing the need for it. And why this optical terminal is so important is um, if you are just bringing the satellites down and really putting them really close to Earth, you're just doing only step one of what needs to be done to really get broadband everywhere. Step two is really linking these satellites with each other as something that hasn't been done efficiently at all until now. Um, Laser communication maybe is about 30-year-old technology, but in terms of cost efficiency, it was nowhere near at a level where one could say it closes our customers' business case because the terminals were so expensive. And every alternative we had today didn't get the bandwidth across. So what our terminal, the Condor terminal, which is our inter-satellite link terminal, will be a game changer for is when it hits the market, it's going to be the first cost-effective, high bandwidth solution of linking these satellites together, and that's really key on making the right type of networks in sky. Um, I really give the example of someone, for example, in London, trying to communicate to Los Angeles. If you want to, if you like right as we are doing right now, right? If you're thinking of that scenario and normally what you would do is you would connect regular over a phone line or a DSL or a fiber if you're really lucky, and then you would use terrestrial lines to communicate all the way to Los Angeles. Um, with the constellation, you talk to the satellite directly above you, and that satellite is very close to Earth, and it sees maybe I want to say Western Europe, or if it's really close, maybe England and Spain and a couple other places. But it doesn't see the US, so the data has to be still carried all the way towards Los Angeles. So there are two scenarios on establishing that. You need to get the data from the originator, take it to the satellites, and you could immediately send it back down to a ground station and carry that terrestrially all the way to Los Angeles using existing but also oversubscribed infrastructure, and making your competitors carry that data. Or what you could do is you, as the person in London, you give the data that you want to communicate up to the satellite, and that satellite connects to the neighboring satellite, and that one connects to the neighboring satellite, on and on and on until you arrive at the satellite that is actually has a visibility of LA, and that one links it down. The latter makes the business case close as long as the solution for lasercom isn't expensive, because what you're not doing is you're not taking the data, immediately sending it right back down and paying some competitor to backhaul the data for you. You're actually keeping the complete communication within your network. And that in itself is a game changer as well.
What are your customers' plans for the initial product validation missions and beyond?
We should say we have a bunch of product validation missions lined up for this year and coming up next year. Most of these customers are customers who have plans to deploy very large constellations, hundreds of satellites. In certain cases, people we're talking are talking thousands of satellites. Their plan is to use these product validation missions really to dot the I and cross the T. We've been working with these organizations for, in some cases, more than a year, and they have really done due diligence to make sure that these product validation missions have a very, very high risk of high chance of success. At the heels of a successful integration and launch and the demonstration of the first few links, their next plans will be to deploy the inter-satellite link in their actual constellation rollout. Most of our customers are looking into the end of next year to start their deployment, and they are really looking into deciding who their suppliers will be. They're making their prime satellite supplier and their supplier base decisions, and these product validations missions exactly go towards that decision.
Please tell us what is happening on the airborne side of the business.
Airborne business is quite different than the space business. In the space business, we see a lot of large customers making very large decisions to, in one contract, buy hundreds, if not thousands, of terminals in one go because they have to deploy a constellation and it has to be compatible. The whole constellation has to be predetermined where it's going to come from. In the airborne side, we see a different model. There, our customers most of the time are the large companies that build airplanes, drones, dirigibles, and high altitude platforms. Um, what they really look at is they have the customers of their own. Very often, it's either government, the military, or any other commercial entity doing airborne networks. But these customers buy capabilities not in the thousands, but in the tens, 15s at a time, but often. So what we see in the airborne side is we see our customers, the drone builders, the aircraft builders, buy our terminals in the 2, 4, 6 range, however many they need, and they build a demo setup. Such that they can show to their customers the capability of our product. Once the demo setup is built and we have integrated with their plane, it becomes a standard option that their customer can order, just like you would order an upgraded hi-fi system on a car that you're buying. It becomes a standard option, and we see then our customers becoming the salespeople of our technology to their end customer. In that realm, our Hawk Air, which is our airborne product, is right now being built. The first production units are being assembled, and the first ones are being tested for delivery to customers actually very soon. And we're going to see many aviation companies to do demos with them in the not so distant future.
Now let's talk about funding. Do you have sufficient funds to keep the business going? And do you feel that liquidity concerns are a worry in this period of economic uncertainty?
Well, we had just done a fundraising round in February that went actually very successful. It was an oversubscribed funding round where we actually brought in fresh liquidity into the company. That actually was good timing, and it gives us quite a good cushion to execute out this year in the necessary pace. And we're not really letting go of any pace right now. I don't think we are in a state of worry. There is plenty of news that are going to come up, and we have liquidity to keep our current pace. What of course is interesting is we are looking into some very large contracts that may come our way, and we will look into these contracts and the liquidity needs they may bring with themselves. In that realm, I think we would look into, of course, going out and raising again if needed, or looking into even other vehicles that may be available to us to give us the liquidity to serve out these contracts. But at the back of a contract, or especially a large contract, that is not that much of an issue, we believe.
Now, thinking about the home office working and social distancing measures that are in place at the moment, the case has been made very forcefully for ubiquitous and always on connectivity. So, do you feel that the pandemic positively impacts the business model of your customers?
Um, I hate to use the word positive in terms of in the connection with pandemic, but I think in this sense, I think it is kind of the right word to use. Yeah, I think we are seeing that connectivity is a basic infrastructure that everyone needs. It just This whole pandemic has revalidated that for us, and though we thought that we have a great connectivity capability all around the world and we had great infrastructure, we're seeing how fast it can be brought to its knees. And we've been also realized how uneven around the world that is. The airborne and the space-based networks have that great advantage that they are ubiquitous and they are quite even in their coverage of the world, and they really get rid of the blind spots. And what they will really push for and what they will really solve is the need for urbanization just to get to better connectivity is going to go away when we have these networks in place. And we will be able to do at home work or distance working a lot more efficiently. And with that, I think we feel our customers' business model is being validated. It's being built up on. I don't think they're really changing their business model as much as they feel validated. And I think the larger customers themselves, as they are solving these distant suburban or rural connectivity issues, they may find nowadays much more listening eyes in their respective regions and governments.
So how should government and commercial players respond now and in the near future to expedite activity that will satisfy this additional demand?
I think the governments and the regional players should start really looking into the communication solutions they have in terms of coverage, the coverage area, not just the coverage quality. I think right now the quality is there. I think we always talk about our peak capabilities in the cities, but the rural coverage isn't there. And we are trying to solve the rural coverage over and over again with these terrestrial technologies that have become so dominantly expensive that it just doesn't connect any more people. And with 5G, we are actually taking a step back and we are getting higher quality to the city centers rather than connecting more people out into the rural areas. So I think what the government and the regions should be doing is looking into capabilities and saying, how do I reach the rest of the people because they're being really disproportionately disadvantaged, and really support airborne networks or spaceborne networks that really get connectivity to the people that don't have it today. And that can be in terms of starting to allocate some of the rural connectivity funding to organizations that are looking into space and airborne networks, or it could also be in the allocation of downlink spectrum that these satellites need.
Speaking about government, the US Space Development Agency is considering building a constellation and has been pretty vocal in its call for commercial solutions. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Of course. The U.S. Space Development Agency just recently issued a draft request for proposals to build a first wave of satellites that are going to pave the way for a very large constellation for the purposes of the U.S. government and especially the U.S. defense sector. It's a multifaceted constellation with multiple layers of satellites, each one with their own tasks, some of them more for imaging, some of them more communications or different type of activities. And the way they are building this up is in a very commercial way. They're realizing what is happening in the commercial side of the aerospace sector, with constellations being built for getting connectivity everywhere, and they want to ride that wave to make sure that they make the most out of it. And what they're doing is, instead of reinventing the wheel, they are looking out into the commercial sector to look for companies that could build equivalent satellites to what the commercial sector is building for the commercial constellations and really find and utilize the synergies. In this first wave of requests for proposals, they are looking into multiple companies building 20 satellites each to showcase what can be done with these constellations. And that's already an amazing start. Normally, a contract like that would be sole sourced with a really large program to a single prime, and would go from there. Where in this case, the Space Development Agency, what they're doing is they're looking at the 2 to 3 companies, making a small portion of the constellation, evaluating them in a really competition fashion with real hardware in a really quick turnaround. What they will definitely do is use these 2-3 companies that they select and pretty much race them against each other, and they will compare the results. They will make sure that they are not tied to a single provider, single solution, making themselves slave to a supply chain that can't be changed later on. They're going to bet on multiple players with multiple solutions. Going into our side of that constellation, one of the main characteristics of the Space Development Agency's capability that they want is optical intersatellite links. That is very apparent in their call for the capabilities to be present on the satellites. And we believe we have exactly what it takes. The Space Development Agency is very clear that the solutions to be prepared are supposed to be very cost efficient, but also producible in high numbers. And today we find ourselves far ahead of our competition in what kind of solution we have in that realm and how it really plays into that. So I am today very confident that we are very well placed to benefit from this RFP, and that we would be placed at least in one, if not two, more of the constellation solutions to be picked out.
Has Mynaric's proposed path for the course of the next 6 to 12 months been modified in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I have to say that our path hasn't changed at all. I think the the deal is the corona is a constraint, and it's not really the actual our requirement. Our requirements given by our market are what they are, and they haven't changed. Our customers still want the products. We still see the constellations full force going. There is a SpaceX Starlink launch with 60 satellites on it already on the path to be launched next week. There's a lot of things happening. The pace hasn't let down. To the contrary, it has only picked up. And if you look at the Space Development Agency, they were already saying, expect a draft request for proposals to come at the end of March. And they held their end of the bargain, and they are keeping the timeline. So we are seeing that our plans haven't changed and what we have to meet haven't changed. It's just what has changed is that we have to do that now in a new world order that is given to us by the constraints of Corona.
Let's have a thought experiment and fast forward 5 years into the future. How do you think laser communication will be used at this point, and what will the communications industry look like? And looking back from that standpoint in 2025, how do you think the COVID pandemic will be regarded? Do you think it'll be seen as a catalyst for the industry, a brake on its development, or irrelevant?
I think if I picture the world in about 5 years, first of all, laser communication is very much going to be the backbone of the aerospace network industry. It is necessary today. If the constellations are supposed to work, and we are supposed to do also this governmental secure communications in the sky, we need to have laser networks connecting them together. We need that mesh network out in air and sky, and there is really no other way to do it. So I don't see a future where this technology is not a mainline technology. I think we will see other competitors to join alongside Mynaric this market. I think we are definitely leading the way in the right terminal with the right price in the market. But I think there'll be others working on this. But the aerospace industry will be looking at companies like us to supply them with this backbone connectivity. To the consumer, I think whether it's laser or not is going to be quite transparent, because we're in the backhaul side of things. We're in the more kind of like the undersea cable. We are in the invisible to the consumer side of things. But I think the aerospace industry is very much going to understand what is happening and what the change there will be. If I look into the broader telecom industry, I think we will now see a new competitor emerge when it comes to connecting the consumer. And that's we already had the DSL versus cable fight, and that cable at some point I'm caught up. Now, most places, cable and fiber are the two capabilities that are available in urban centers. And we're going to now very, very soon see the constellation connectivity to become another competitor, and in many places beat out the competition in terms of the quality provided in that area. I don't think you and I in the middle of Los Angeles or London, we will use the connectivity given by constellations, but just go a little bit outside of the city centers, and it's going to be the very competitive or the best solution available. Looking at the corona at this time, from 5 years from now, I want to say it's going to be a small catalyst to a irrelevance to the industry. I think people had made their decision to make constellations way before this pandemic. They had done their path, they have done their schedules, and overall they are executing to them. These are long-term plans, and the coronavirus period, as painful as it is, it's just a blip along the way where it's another constraint to work around. If anything, it's going to allow them to have a helpful hand of the government, help them out connecting the rural people, and it's going to show, it's going to allow them, our customers, to show their business case to the financiers of connectivity. I think it's going to, in that case, be helpful, but overall, I think this is just a small little effect on the larger picture.
Right. Thank you. That's really interesting. Thank you very much.